Welcome to the Refreshing Leadership Podcast, where I help you refresh your thinking in both life and work. And today I'm here to help you refresh your motivation towards your big goals for this year. Today's episode is grounded in something that we know from psychology, which is that we're wired to stay motivated when we can see progress and to lose motivation when we can't. So if you're working towards anything meaningful right now, whether that's a career move or a strength goal or building a business, growing your authority, this episode will help you understand what's happening when it feels like nothing is happening. When we're in that messy middle phase of a goal, when nothing really seems to be moving. And as we're approaching the middle of the year, it may well be that some of the goals that you kicked off in January are now in that messy middle phase. You might be putting effort in, showing up, doing the work, but there's less evidence for you at this point that that is actually adding up. And that can be really frustrating. It's often one of the hardest parts of any meaningful goal. The beginning part brings energy and novelty, momentum. There's some probably easy startup, right? We can go and buy some tools or equipment, and then the end again brings its own energy as the finish line is in sight. Even if you're tired, you can see that finish line. But that middle, which is often the majority, especially for a big goal, it's often the majority of the time, is much less glamorous. It can feel repetitive, unclear, uphill, and you can start questioning the goal and even yourself. But for important goals, we need to find ways in this phase to not give up on the goal if it's important. Our brains are highly responsive to feedback. Even dopamine, which is often talked about as the motivation molecule, is linked to feedback loops and signals that something's working. There's the progress principle, which shows that even small visible wins can significantly boost motivation and well-being. The problem is when that progress is not visible for quite a long time. We have a couple of options here. We can either create smaller, measurable bits that we can then start ticking off and creating some of that visible progress. But there are going to be other times when we're going to need to draw on some other tools to help make this goal inevitable. And that's what I want to talk about today. When the goalpost still feels quite far away, when progress is hard to see, and when part of you is wondering whether any of this is actually working, what can we do to support ourselves in that process and to support the goals? So the first part of this is about extending your timelines. Most things that matter take longer than we think. Career pivots, strength building, growing a business, changing some of your behaviors and habits, building authority, creating something meaningful. They don't tend to fit into neat and tidy timeframes. And that's because this stuff is within your control. This stuff isn't when it comes to any particular issue, outcome, or situation. And over time with coaching, we can expand what is within your control. But on any given day, there is only a fixed amount. And so we cannot always control when that particular outcome is going to arrive. But by making the time frame too short, we can often stifle our goals. We can knock the oxygen out of them. And this is something that unfortunately has been reinforced by the concept of SMART goals, which are, I believe, highly misused inside organizations. So SMART is great for controllable processes and milestones. So it is specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. But for big, complex, meaningful goals, it can actually kill those because you do not control the full outcome or the timing on big, meaningful goals. There are going to be aspects which are outside your control, and therefore you cannot apply SMART to the entire goal. You can only apply SMART to the process that you are in control of. So the first shift here is really simple. If it's feeling hard, if it's feeling like it's not showing up yet, don't drop the goal, just widen the timeline. The next one, when a goal starts to feel like complex, messy, and none of it's making sense, we need a little bit more than logic to help us. So let me explain this a little bit more. most of the goals that we are trying to achieve are not a simple 10-step plan that is one size fits all, right? For example, just a fitness goal alone, you need to factor in age, injury, personality, lifestyle, hormones. It is a lot more complex than a simple 10-step plan. So there are going to be phases when things are not working or they're taking longer, and it's hard to logic that, right? It's hard to just apply logic and say, well, logically it should take this long, so let's, etc. Sometimes we are doing a multi-factor approach to a goal. We are throwing everything at it and we don't exactly know which part is going to work. So that's where we hit a bit of a limit if we're only approaching it with that analytical, logical mind. And so this is the bit where I say, let's bring in that other half of our brain, the vision, the belief, the identity. I am somebody who, rather than I'm waiting for this to happen before I can be happy, successful, etc. Intuition, again, these are all the things that a logical brain alone is going to miss out. If you are someone like me who is very evidence oriented, this can initially feel uncomfortable because you want proof before you fully commit to goals. And I understand that. And I think that proof in some way, some form of evidence can be very important. But if you are doing something new that doesn't have a perfect playbook because you're not following a perfect linear career, you won't always have that proof that it works for somebody like you, exactly like you, up front. And that's where we do want to draw on some kind of conviction, not blind delusion like trust the process. Gosh, that one really does not work for me. If somebody is telling me to trust the process, then I'm less likely to trust the process. But I do think we need to find ways of creating self-belief that this goal is possible for us. If you don't, you do subtly hold yourself back. And I think this is where my difficult puzzle analogy is quite helpful. So I did a similar related episode to this when I had completed the hardest puzzle that I've ever done in my life, which was a Van Gogh Starry Night puzzle. It was so difficult that sometimes I would spend more than 40 minutes not being able to place a single puzzle piece. And family members would walk past the table, have a go because that's what a puzzle invites you to do, and they wouldn't be able to get a single thing in. It was just the way it had been printed out or the way it had been cut was really unhelpful. However, I did have this knowing that it was a complete puzzle because it was a brand new puzzle in K-minutes plastic, and that it was going to be finishable. And I saw videos online about it as well and people managing to finish it. So I knew it was solvable. And because it was a puzzle, that was a more contained belief, right? It was easier to know that. And because of that, I stuck with it way longer than felt logically right, because it was such a time drain and it wasn't, you didn't get the momentum, you didn't get that feedback that our brains are wired to receive when they are in pursuit of a goal. That dopamine was few and far in between for quite a long time. But what made it possible was knowing that a puzzle is solvable, and therefore it did get complete. And I really took that analogy and saw that in the context of our other goals. It's a very subtle shift that we need to make from believing it's possible and subtly just doubting that it's right for us. And I am, in any group program, in any coaching, I am definitely more biased towards the cynic. I want to have all of my objections and challenges really cleverly rebutted before I am fully bought into a process. So I am very much somebody that sits in that space of like, I need proof here before I can then completely surrender to a process. But I do know that once I have got that confidence, once I have got some faith that this is possible and it is possible for me, that is when the goal can unlock for me. So if you are working towards a goal, but there is part of you that you're now recognizing as I'm saying this, that doesn't believe it's fully possible for you, then that is worth examining. Sometimes you need to put yourself in a pair of safe, trusted hands, and somebody who you believe does have expertise in that space that can kind of challenge you warmly and say, no, actually, you're seeing this obstacle, you're seeing this obstacle. Well, this is actually what's possible. Okay, the third one. be more systematic. So when we have the systems and habits and routines and they feel good, which I'm going to talk about a little bit further on as well, then that reduces some decision fatigue, right? This idea that what should I do next, or what's the next right step? You can just put your energy into following the right system. Now, going back to the don't just trust the process thing, it is really important that you find credible sources, you test, you refine, you personalize. Ideally, you get support from someone who you do trust, can give you the right critical path to achieve what it is that you want to achieve. I always believe that coaches are the shortcut if they are expert in what they do and they have proven results and they have achieved things themselves. And so if I want to ever do anything, I will be quick to jump into coaching on whatever it is and then get what I need, which is a very, very personalized critical path for me. Because once you have that, you can then set up processes and systems and follow them for a period. And it may be that you follow them for 90 days, 3 months, and then you check in. But you allow yourself some period, some runway of just blindly following without needing to check in. And again, I say this as somebody who has needed a lot of feedback in the past. I have needed that feedback loop, that positive reinforcement route in the past. What I have got a lot better at over time, building a business, building a podcast, building home, career, all of those things. What I've got more used to is having periods where you really want something and you set up your processes and then you slowly but surely just get on with it. And then before you know it, a significant chunk of time has passed. When you then check in, you see the real progress that has happened rather than the constant, is it working? What should I be doing next? So again, I feel like this one is subtle, that yes, you want to be systematic. Yes, you want to have processes, but first you want to test those processes and get really comfortable that they are the right ones for you. Okay, the final one, which is hopefully the fun one, is making it as enjoyable as possible. If a goal is going to take months and years, then it needs to feel at least a bit good along the way. Otherwise, at some point, your brain will start to get tired, it will start to resist it. In positive psychology, we talk about intrinsic motivation, where the process itself has meaning and enjoyment, not just the outcome. So one example for me is my baked oats. These really feel like a luxury. They're called almond croissant baked oats, and all of my family love them as well. I love making them. It's quite relaxing. You know how people often say they bake to unwind. Like, I feel like it's one of those. All my ingredients, because I've been doing it quite regularly, they're all to hand, so I'm not scrambling around trying to find them. And then what it does mean is that during the week, when I have prepped them in advance, then I have 3 or 4 ready to go breakfasts in advance, which have good protein in them. They support my goals. And so the process feels good sort of at every stage. And I really enjoy it. And I've really enjoyed building that into my life. And to be honest, at this point in my life, I want goals that are fun, that the process is actually fun. I want to enjoy the process. And I believe that there's normally a way. There's normally a way to play to your unique strengths, your personality type, and your preferences to make it more fun. And that's going to look really different for different people. Again, using the fitness example, I've got a couple of people in my life who tell me that they just love the data. They are really analytical, logical, and so they really enjoy all of that data. Me, I can take it or leave it. There's some data that I like. I now have a sheet and I can see how I am increasing and progressive overloading every session. There are some times when I'm tired, and so progressing literally looks like 1 extra rep or 2 extra reps. It really doesn't need to be much, but there is nothing better for me than the final part of my workout when I get onto the pull-up machine and I play around and I see whether I can get to that next level. That is pure playground fun for me. So Where do you find joy in your processes, and where you can make it fun? That will be your sustainability. That's what will allow you to increase your timelines. And that's where you will be able to just sort of follow the system and not be so reliant on that feedback loop, because the process itself is intrinsically rewarding. So the need for that extrinsic is lower. So I hope that has given you a few things to think about when you are not at the fun part of a goal. You're going to extend timelines, use more than just your logical brain. So tap into intuition, vision, and that other part of your brain that is more creative. Have systems, test them, know that the success is in those systems. And then finally, making the process as enjoyable as possible. Please share this with somebody else if you know they are struggling with a goal right now. Let me know what is the goal that you were thinking of as I was taking you through this. And I look forward to connecting with you next time. Bye-bye.